All right, welcome back to another episode of True Crime Saturday. Tonight, I gotta apologize. I was aiming for 9 o'clock, didn't end up happening. So for those that have been waiting patiently or are seeing this at a later time, I do apologize for the late arrival. There was a lot going on in the background, of course, but end of the day, there were some things I need to go and clear up between this, and on top of that, my body's still aching pretty severely from work. So, well, my day job, I should say. So, regardless, I'm here, but we are going to be discussing the Phantom of Heilbronn tonight. Now, this case is huge. Either you really know it or not. To be honest, this is a case that I'd never even heard about prior to 2 weeks ago. This case, the reason it's so important, you guys can probably see slightly in the background here on the set, but it has a lot of interesting aspects when it comes to the criminalistics fields. We're looking at like law enforcement, anybody that's a detective, somebody that's in forensics, somebody that's in criminal law. This is going to be really, really important for you guys to pay very, very close attention to. And the reason being, I will reveal here in a moment. But this case, just to give you guys kind of a background on this, it's a very, very peculiar one because a lot of these crimes that were occurring throughout Germany, France, Austria, I believe in Hungary. There's quite a few different places. There was all these crimes that the same DNA, the same female DNA, and to be very specific, Eastern European female DNA that was appearing throughout all of these different countries at different times. It made it seem like there was a female serial killer / criminal, just regardless, as there was robberies and burglaries and just break-ins, things like this, just randomly just occurring. And nobody could find any real reason behind why these crimes were occurring. And then, of course, there was people that discovered the details about this case. But the really, really peculiar part is this was going on from 1993, technically. It'll say up there 1997 till about 2006. But let's get in. We'll take a look, and I'll start breaking this down. So, what we really have here, this is going on for a while. This is female DNA that was found in all these crime scenes. And it was puzzling pretty much every law enforcement individual is involved with this. Detectives, just officers on the scene, forensic scientists, things like this. Everybody was puzzled by this. Why is this same female DNA popping up? And we don't even really know what this person looks like. Well, let's just go over a few of these here, okay? So, the first one we're going to talk about is there was DNA evidence found on a cup in the vicinity of... Oh, I spelled vicinity incorrectly, of course. Of a murdered 62-year-old woman in Idar Oberstein, Germany. Okay? I'm not going to give out the dates because, honestly, end of the day, this is going to get really bizarre, and you guys will understand why I'm not really bringing up the dates, okay? In 2001, DNA evidence was found on a kitchen drawer in the vicinity of a murdered 61-year-old man in Freiburg, Germany. Also, and there's two more where DNA evidence is collected. There was one on a syringe containing heroin in a wooded area near Gerolstein, Germany. And then there was one on a cookie, of all things, in a trailer that was forcefully opened in Budenheim, Germany. And then in 2003 and beyond, there was over 20 other cases where DNA evidence was actually found at the scenes of these nonviolent crimes, all the way up to mysterious deaths. Really, really peculiar. But the same female DNA was shown up. Well, the problem with this is when they started looking into these crimes for years, over 40 crimes, and they really had no excuse as to why they were just basically following this one female DNA, right? And why they couldn't couldn't explain why they couldn't catch this person. Well, what it turned out to be was there was human DNA that contaminated these cotton swabs where at this manufacturing facility that was over, I believe it was, I don't know how to pronounce this, like Thurau or something like this. It's southern Germany. They found that it was the same female working at this manufacturing plant, that we're not sure exactly what happened, but her DNA had contaminated a number of these cotton swabs. And of course, these cotton swabs, they sit there for a while, but here's the thing. They become sealed in these little packages. What's happening, they're airtight. So the DNA just sits there. Now, it can degrade, but you look at the time frame, okay, from 1993 until 2009. I meant to say 2009, not 2006, but what's so important is the fact that after this is when the International Organization of Standardization, which is referred to as ISO, actually published a standard, which is ISO, I believe it's 18385, and that was in 2016. And that was almost primarily because of this case. But they had found other cases. There were other cases that had basically gotten false positives on things, and incorrect information or this contamination had actually screwed up a bunch of cases. But this was the big one here. This is the primary reasoning why this was published. And now this is why over like in pretty much everywhere else in the world, but primarily in Europe, and I will say this does affect the United States, even though I'm sure there's going to be others out there who would say, well, it doesn't. The thing is, when standards like this hit the market and they hit, the public space, these do affect even American standards. Okay? All I got to say is if you look at things like when it comes to like food, right? FDA, do they follow every single thing that all these other international, like for instance, European food standards follow? No, but there's quite a few that they do. But then you got to look at over at things like, this is where it gets into, other things like Codex Alimentarius and things like that, where they're essentially like, they're the food board of the world. They're the United Nations of food, essentially. But that's for a different topic, a different day. But that's how this is here, the International Organization of Standardization works, very, very similarly. But what they ended up finding was this one case here that was tied in with all these other ones, and it didn't make much sense, which was Michelle, I'm going to butcher her name, so I do apologize to the family and friends and even to Michelle herself, but I'm just going to refer to her as Michelle K. To be on the safe side here. But she was actually murdered. She was a German police officer who was murdered over in Heilbronn, Germany, and it was April 25th, 2007. What ended up happening, if you guys can see the highlighting here, her and her partner there were officers that were, basically they had decided they were going to take their lunch, right? Well, when they pull off the side of the road, kind of just eating their lunch, both officers were ambushed and shot in the head by two gunmen who approached the vehicle from behind. Well, they were shot in the head. Now, the thing is, when the police and the ambulance arrived on the scene, both officers were actually lying on the ground, not in their cars, and their guns and their handcuffs were all missing. Well, what's more is they found that a good portion, you start looking through these murders, these associated crimes here, you start looking through, and some of them can be tied even to the neo-socialist underground movement. 3 individuals were actually tied directly to it. There were several other supporters throughout Europe, primarily in Germany, or the underground Nazis as I call them. But they had been tied to crimes ranging from arson to homicide to bombings, robberies, bank robberies to be precise, a number of different crimes. And it was a vast majority of all these other crimes that were kind of going on. Now there's crimes that, of course, you look at these, they weren't tied to, right? some of them you could definitely argue it's a possibility, but this is where you got to go and get into starting to check the alibis and all this. But of course, can't, because two of the members, the two gunmen themselves, actually commit suicide. So we can only go and look back so far. Okay, but the third person had actually turned themselves in. And this is where we get a great deal of information pertaining to what they were involved in. Right, but now this is big, and the reason being is because, of course, this is where we get the international standard. The ISO 18385. This is where we get that from, and this is how we start getting more of a more contaminant-free, I guess, would be the best way to describe it, crime scene, and for evidence collection and things like that. So, but the thing is, really, is there a Phantom of Heilbronn? No, there is not. To be very, very clear. Now, the thing is, what these neo-Nazis were tied to, we're still finding out more and more and more. And was this the end of them? Don't even begin to think it was. Okay? Because look at the ties there were to all sorts of other organizations. Now, these individuals did not apparently like Turkish and Greek individuals. There's a few other nationalities, but essentially they did not want them in Germany. They had similar Nazi-esque ideologies to that of the original Nazis, but they're still quite a bit different. But at the end of the day, it's still Nazis. But that's where you have to go and start questioning, well, did they have ties to these other organizations? The Azov Battalion over in Ukraine. Did they have ties to any American neo-Nazi movements? Did they have any ties to any other